Here on the Obelisk, we love to explore the forbidden. So here's a forbidden question for you. What if Jesus never promised a single life followed by an eternal judgment, but instead hinted that the soul itself might wander, birth after birth, in search for perfection? Imagine a dimly lit chamber in Alexandria 1,800 years ago. A young student of Origen unrolls a parchment, his hands trembling as he reads words that would later be condemned as heresy. The soul pre-exists before birth and perhaps returns again. Welcome to the Obelisk, where forgotten faith, forbidden texts, and sacred heresy get a historical examination. And if you like that, if you like history and not being preached to, then you'll like it here, because that's all we do. Everything that we do here is backed by archaeology, it's backed by the consensus of scholars. Some of them scholars might be on the fringe end, but they still get examined. So let's ask a dangerous question. Did Jesus teach reincarnation? Here's how we'll explore it. We're going to meet Origen, the brilliant but controversial father of Christian theology, who argued souls existed before birth. Then, with a neutral stance, we'll examine the Bible for passages that hint at reincarnation, or something that might look very close to it. There's a massive argument on both sides whether the Bible supports reincarnation or it doesn't. So we're going to look at the arguments for and the arguments against. We're going to uncover how the church condemned these teachings at Constantinople and erased them from orthodoxy. And we will take a little look at heretics, mystics, and secret sects who preserved the ideas underground. So, let's begin. Origen of Alexandria, writing in the 3rd century, was perhaps the most daring mind in early Christianity. He believed the soul did not begin at conception, but existed before, falling from God, incarcerating into flesh, and struggling towards return. In his book on First Principles, he wrote, "Every soul is introduced into a body and is introduced according to its desert and former actions." That sounds eerily like karma, doesn't it? Not unlike Hindu or Buddhist thought, though Origen would have called it divine judgment rather than reincarnation. For him, the soul's journey was long, spanning multiple states of being. If not reincarnation outright, it was at least the idea that the soul had lived before. So, was Origen keeping alive a whisper from Jesus himself? Or was he importing foreign philosophy into Christianity? So, if reincarnation was truly alien to the earliest Christian thought, why does some passages seem like a smoking gun, or at least some argue that it is? The argument for a hidden teaching would include John 9, verse 1 and 2. Jesus' disciples ask, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Those favouring a reincarnistic reading say this question could only make sense if the man could have existed and sinned before birth. Then there's Matthew 17:10 to 13. The disciples ask about Elijah's return. Jesus replies that Elijah has already returned and then refers to John the Baptist. Now, some see this as literal reincarnation and not metaphorical fulfillment. In Jeremiah 1 verse 5, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." To some, this implies a pre-existing soul known to God long before conception. Now, it wouldn't be balanced if we didn't get the mainstream's counterarguments against these positions. And they include that John 9 reflects a first-century theological debate. Jesus reframes the discussion about God's power, not past lives. Then, with John the Baptist being Elijah, refers to role fulfillment, not literal rebirth. And Jeremiah 1 verse 5 expresses divine foreknowledge, not proof of a soul's pre-existence. So where does that leave us? Perhaps centuries later, we are reading complexity into texts that were simple to the original audience. Interpretation of scripture is intensely personal and contentious. The evidence can be compelling in either direction. So let's look at the doctrinal approaches and how the early church dealt with the question. So, by the 6th century, Origen's ideas were dangerous. At the Second Council of Constantinople in 553 CE, Emperor Justinian condemned the teaching of pre-existent souls. Why? Well, it's because reincarnation undermines the Church's monopoly on salvation. Endless chances make eternal damnation kind of meaningless. Weakening the Church's authority, Jean-Jacques Glasner once wrote of Mesopotamian scribes, "Writing was a technology of power." Orthodoxy, in a similar way, became a teaching of control. Origen was branded a heretic, his writings burnt, and the possibility of reincarnation buried. So, now that we've got the mainstream out of the way, we're going to look at the heretical underground movement. And this is where the idea refused to die. The Gnostics whispered of souls trapped in cycles, seeking escape through gnosis, which would be like inner knowledge. I've got a full list up here regarding inner knowledge. Might be up here. Up here. To the Cathars of medieval France, which is kind of like the Knights Templar-esque sort of thing, they believed that souls reincarnated until purified. In Jewish mysticism, Kabbalists spoke of Gilgul Neshamot, the rolling of souls. Not that that rolls off the tongue very easily, but it'll be on screen. Even today, some Christian mystics and esoteric orders revive the teachings, claiming it was deliberately hidden by Rome. Samuel Noah Kramer once wrote, "History begins at Sumer." But perhaps Christianity began with more than we remember, more than we were allowed to keep. And this brings up a rather personal conversation I had with a very dear friend of mine, and it was mainly revolving around the narrative of the early church. So, if the early church was the universal church, and we know that they had people like the Valentinians in there, within the ranks, and through generation after generation, the doctrine got narrower and it became more strict. So we've got a period where Jesus dies, the interpretation is very wide, it funnels through what is now the Catholic Church, previously was known as the Universalist Church. And then it kind of spreads out again later on, which is where other denominations pop up, such as the Protestants, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons, and it kind of seems like that level of control since the printing presses, it kind of vanished, and we're kind of returning back to how faith used to be before the institutionalization of the church. I'm not saying that the church was a bad thing. They definitely kept some very important documents alive. However, let's get back to the question. Did Jesus teach reincarnation? Now, we have Origen's philosophy, biblical hints, and the heavy hand of councils trying to silence it. The official church says no, and the heretics and mystics say yes. The truth may be it lies in the silence in between. Perhaps the greatest resurrection Jesus hinted at was not just one at the end of time, but the countless times that the soul rises again wearing new flesh. This has been the Obelisk. Let me know what you think about the reincarnation in the comment section below. And do you believe that reincarnation belongs in Christianity, or was it always a foreign idea stitched into scripture? I respond to every single comment, so if you've made it this far, then subscribe. We're chasing 1,000 by the end of the year, hopefully. Now, that brings us on to channel news. It's been a crazy last 3 months. I know the channel's like 2 years old, but I've only actually been posting for the last 3 months. So, from our very first video, or my very first video, I'll play a little section up here. You can kind of see the level of quality improvement. Kind of took an approach of improving every video by 1%, and then hopefully at video 100, it'll be twice as good. So, kind of leaving out compounding interest. Irrelevant, right? So, what I'd like to do is I'm looking to improve these videos, and well, hopefully I can do that in editing. But what I'd like to do is increase the quality of the videos. And to do that, I have to follow metrics. I have to follow where the audience is engaging, where you guys are engaging. So with that in mind, after analyzing the last month of videos, I'm noticing that the Christian-themed videos are kind of getting a lot less traction, and kind of makes sense. I mean, we're not exactly in the realms of agreeing with every Christian out there. So, what I'd like to do is, I'd like to restructure. Mondays, we do mythology Mondays, and we're going to keep that. That's going to be the same. Wednesdays, I've kept for short stories and parables from the ancient world. And Fridays was a Christian-themed videos, but I don't think I'm getting the traction on them, and I want to make things and put effort into things that people want to watch. I want to improve this channel. I want to get it somewhere, because I think that the ancient world deserves to have all of its history remembered, and the only way that we do that is by sharing them. So, I'm feeling like I'm just going to freestyle Fridays. I think it'll give me a little bit more confidence on the videos. I've tried to freestyle this one a little bit more, and yeah, I'm trying to break off of reading scripts. There's a lot of things that I need to keep on script with, because obviously I have to try to keep historical accuracy and, you know, making sure I don't misspeak or imply something that's not true. So I've been kind of walking on eggshells. So with Friday's episode, we're just going to like take down the guardrails at the bowling, and we're just going to hope we get a strike and not a 7-10. I don't even know if that's the right number. Anyway, hit the subscribe button. I'm rambling, so hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave me a comment, let me know what you'd like to see next. Until next time, take care.